Hi everyone. What I'm going to go through on this video is the examples from all of the cognition terms that have appeared on prior AP Psych exams in the past about 20 years. So we're going to go over all of them. It's going to be kind of long. Get out a piece of paper and a pen. I'm going to give you specific key phrases that would have scored and other phrases that would not have scored on these terms. So it's a really nice resource to have available for yourself in preparation for the exam. Before we get started, why is cognition the most tested unit on the AP Psych exam? It's because the terms from our cognition unit apply to most real life situations, because cognition, if you remember, it's comprised of how we think about things, so thinking, the knowledge that we have already, memories that we have formed about experiences, and also just procedural memories, things that we don't even know how it got into our memory. We also have ways of making judgments and decisions. That whole process is based on cognition. And then we have also language. Language is also considered part of cognition. And also problem solving. That's what I wanted to say. How we go about solving problems is really a cognitive process. So a lot of times the free response questions have a situation where someone has to solve a problem, or they need to think about things, they need to rely on their memory. So that's why this unit appears the most on your AP Psych exams in prior history. Okay, so one of the ways to solve problems is by using an algorithm, and that was one of the first terms that was that we're going to address. It was from 2015 exam. This question is going to come up a couple times in this video, so pay attention. Chandler and Alex were transferred to a new city and need to find a new home. They carefully considered every house within their price range and finally purchased one that met all their criteria. So explain how each of the following is related to their decision to buy a new home. So the way you should start your FRQ is to say that Chandler and Alex's decision to buy a new home was related to an algorithm, because then you define algorithm. Algorithm is a step-by-step procedure for making a decision. So make sure that you say they, tried every option is a great example for this, in order to make a decision. So we just want to make sure that we don't say anything like trial and error process, but the key here is you want to say the whole sentence about Chandler and Alex, referencing the prompt, developed a formula, referencing what an algorithm is, in order to make a decision to determine how much house they could afford. This is a decision. So you not only are going to say what they did to solve the problem, you're also going to mention the problem solving that had to happen. Okay, availability heuristic is a way of solving a problem not by using a step-by-step procedure. Heuristic, if you remember correctly, is a kind of shortcut to make a decision or solve a problem. And availability is the word here that when we use a definition, we cannot use the word available, because that is part of the term. So that's where we need to use our synonyms. So example here is that Annabelle is planning to apply to college but has not yet decided where she will apply. Describe how the following psychological concepts and terms relate to her choice. So you could say, again, make sure you reference the prompt right away. The ability to make a decision about where she's going to go to college Annabelle can use an availability heuristic to make that choice. So what is an availability heuristic? That is that the most important key phrases I want you to write down for availability heuristic, just in case you're struggling with the words on the exam. You can say the word pops into her mind, the first thing she thinks of, automatically, immediately. All of these words refer to the availability heuristic, because it's the information that is immediate in your, you can access it very quickly and immediately, and it can influence your decisions. Okay, this problem came up again in 2015. In this study, I'll just shorten it for you. The researchers were trying to do some study, and they found out that sugar causes hyperactivity is what they concluded. So how might the following explain why people might easily accept the conclusion of the study? So if people want to easily accept the conclusion, and that's forming a cognition about that, they might, again, the sentences that you should remember for availability heuristic is things that pop into your mind, things that are easily recalled because they're recent. So if you say that people would be more likely to to accept the conclusions of the study based on the availability heuristic, it's because people will base their beliefs on information that is readily accessible to them or easily recalled. So for example, they may have been at a birthday party last week and saw lots of children in a very hyperactive state after eating a cupcake. So that would be an example of why they might easily accept the conclusion of the study based on the availability heuristic. Okay, then it came up in 2005 again. Same type of thing. I'm not really going to read the whole question, but how can availability heuristic create an inaccurate perception, cognition, or conclusion? And again, what they're looking for here is that availability heuristic is information that is readily available. Also, another word term for that is salient, from personal experience, the news, etc. So you can say that someone believes that planes are unsafe because of a recent plane crash. That would be great, but if you don't put this phrase about the recent plane crash, that will not score. Okay, so next we have belief perseverance. So belief perseverance is when somebody continues to have the same existing opinion or maintains their beliefs and refuses to change them, even though they're offered contradictory evidence. Okay, so you don't want to say something like, oh, his beliefs persevere, because that is not defining, it's not showing the person who's reading the answer that you've given that you know anything about belief perseverance. Belief perseverance is when someone is presented with contradictory information but still maintains their original opinions and beliefs. Okay, so that's really important to mention both parts of that. Chunking. Okay, so chunking, when you think of chunking, it's not okay just to say that you are grouping information. See, the term chunking alone, in place of grouping or combining, is not an explanation enough of the term for them to understand that you really know what it means. When we talk about chunking in terms of memory, what happens is we group similar items together. This is a specific strategy that we use to remember things, and that's what you have to say for chunking. That learning or the recall of language by grouping or chunking the material helped Savannah be more successful in her learning or performance. It increased the amount of information that she could hold in her short-term memory. So we have to be really specific about how chunking is used to memorize things. We can't just say that, you know, she broke things up into smaller pieces. That's not really what chunking is. It involves specific grouping of information so that you can remember it more easily. Okay, cognitive map. This came up. James is in a driver's education course preparing to take his driver's test. The course includes both book work and driving on the road to prepare students for a written and road test. All right, letter A asks, how does each of the following influence his ability to drive a car during the road test? So cognitive map. A cognitive map is a mental representation of spatial information. So the reason why I put that, why I highlighted that, is because I want you to try to start getting used to what terms you should use in place of the actual words that are in the term when you're defining them. I think you'll have an easy time applying to the situation. Just be careful with your wording so that you're making it clear to the reader that you understand how this relates exactly to psychology and you're not just repeating the words that are in the definition. What I want you to really know is that the mental image by itself does not qualify as an answer. So you can't just say James has an image in his head and helps him drive better. We have to specify that image is of the environment. The environment is really important, and you'll notice that right here it says James' memory of the layout of the dashboard might help him drive more effectively. Now, we're not even talking about the environment generally, we're talking about his immediate environment right in front of his face, and that still qualifies because we're specifying that we have a mental representation of where things are in the world around us. All right, context-dependent memory. So this is memory. Jackie's been chosen for lead role in school play. She is both nervous and excited about this opportunity. This question was a great question a couple years ago, and it's likely that they'll try to set something up for you like that again this year on the exam. So how does each of the following help her performance in the play? So context-dependent memory, if you remember, is that you use something external as a memory cue. So for example, if you take the test, if you learn something in our classroom every day and then you take the test in the same context, in the same classroom and environment, that might help trigger more memory cues, and that can be related to a positive performance for Jackie. So you want to pick something in her environment that she's used to practicing on to help her on the actual play day. So her role, she wants to rehearse her role on the stage on which the play will actually take place. So that's all you have to do is make sure you mention the context that she's taking it in and the place. What didn't score was mood congruent memories. And just to review quickly, mood congruent memories were things that when Jackie is sad, she is more likely to remember sad events. So her memory is cued to mood congruent memories that match her current mood. Now, also, what I want you to be really careful of is that reasons for forgetting don't score. So when you guys were doing the reinforcement examples, be careful that when you're talking about how memory helps her, you don't talk about how forgetting hurts her. You understand what I'm saying? So memory helps her by blah, blah, blah. That's what you want to address. Try to avoid explaining the opposite, okay? Very important there. Our crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence come up a lot on these exams, so let's make sure we just go over this really quickly. Annabelle is applying to college but not has yet decided where to apply. She described how each of the following concepts relates to her choice. So the second bullet point here, or whatever, B, says explain how these concepts relate to how well she does and adapts when she begins her college career. Okay, so this is really important. Crystallized intelligence. How does crystallized intelligence help her adapt to her new college career? Crystallized intelligence is the acquired skills, knowledge or experiences that we have. So remember, that's different than fluid intelligence, and you have to say specifically how it's going to help her or relate to her adaptation in real life. So you want to make sure that we talk about that Annabelle's knowledge allows her to do well on tests. What Annabelle learns in her college introductory course helps her make friends. So we're talking about crystallized intelligence. As long as you talk about how it's an acquired skill, any knowledge she has, or experiences, that will score. You cannot reference functional fixedness or mental set, which we'll talk about later, but also make sure that you do not talk about fluid intelligence, which is different. Divergent thinking is a very simple term to remember, and it has come up on a bunch of exams, so let's just make sure we know the difference. Divergent thinking is when you think outside of the box. You are creative, you're diverging outside of what traditional thought processes are. Converging is like converging lines. When you converge, you're getting more narrow in your thinking. So in this case, we have Dimitri and Linda. They're trying to learn a new dance routine. How can the following affect their performance? So as long as you say anything about creativity, thinking outside the box, many possible solutions, any of those would work. So that's really good. What I really want to point out is that differing opinions. So you can't just say that Dimitri and Linda don't agree with what their teacher's saying, so they want to go off in a different direction. That's not really divergent thinking. That's just that's an example of differing opinions. Divergent thinking is when you're thinking outside of the box and they think differently than all other routines that they've done in the past and that have been done in prior competitions. Okay. Divergent thinking again came up. Abram was graduating from high school and beginning his first year of four-year university. The second part says his first year was very difficult and he wants to use the following to come up with a plan on how to make him more successful in the future. So remember, divergent thinking, creativity is the word we're looking for. Thinks outside the box is a word we're looking for. Innovative thinker. Okay, so any of phrases that have that, and you can pick any kind of way it would help him. You can pick anything for that. Okay, elaborative rehearsal. This is really important. This has to do with memory. Now we're getting into memory things. Here, Abram, he wants to see how elaborative rehearsal helps him in in future in college. Okay, so when you have elaborative rehearsal, you have to make sure that, now when we're talking about elaborative rehearsal, you are elaborating on your memorization of the term. Let's say you're remembering a list. You have to remember to include the word linking to be remembered material with other information. So when you link a term that you're trying to memorize with prior information you already know, that's elaborative rehearsal, and that is different than other types of memory maintenance rehearsal, things like that. Okay, so, but the point is that your response must go above and beyond such memorizing techniques such as repeating, rehearsing, or memorizing. Just those alone are not indicative that you know what the word elaborative rehearsal means. Elaborative is when you link it to other information in any way. So score examples of effortful processing such as imagery, creating mnemonics, building associations. All of those are acceptable as long as you go into that. That's what elaborative rehearsal is when you study. Okay, encoding failure, Savannah, we're back to Savannah. We saw her in an earlier question. She is trying to take Japanese and explain how the following may hinder her as she takes the exam. So encoding failure is the failure to process or put information into memory. The information not attended to will not be processed. And you could also say shallow processing leads to more forgetting. So how will it hinder her? Well, great example would be the shallow processing one. If she never put the words into memory in the first place, that goes with the second one. But the shallow processing leads to more forgetting. Let's say she just memorizes that I don't know Japanese, but let's say that the first letter of cat in Japanese is a certain phoneme, then that's not really elaborative. That's not a really good way to memorize this. There could be an encoding failure if you just memorize it at surface level and shallow processing. Okay, so make sure though, here's the important thing. The term encoding alone in place of the phrase put information into memory. We need to make sure that you say that it puts the information into memory. You can't use the word encoding again, and you can't say that it was encoded incorrect, that it was not encoded correctly, because you're using the word encode again. All right, figure ground. Figure ground is a perceptual type of way of looking at things. You differentiate the object in the figure versus the background. And in this example in 2020, they were at a pep rally and show how the behavior and perceptions of the participants in the pep rally are affected using the concepts below. So figure ground, we have the examples right here, and you can look at that on your own. Fluid intelligence is important. So remember, this is different than crystallized intelligence. Time is an important variable in many psychological concepts. Describe a specific example that clearly demonstrates an understanding of the following concepts and how it relates to time or is affected by time. So when we're talking about fluid intelligence right away, how is fluid intelligence affected by time? Over time, fluid intelligence, which is the reasoning ability, problem-solving ability, flexibility, speed information processing, that over time declines. Remember, as you get older, your fluid intelligence declines, and your fluid intelligence is one of these types of cognitive processes. Okay, so do not score if the student confuses fluid intelligence with crystallized intelligence or general knowledge. Okay, fluid intelligence came up again on this one. This study is comparing young people and older people and their ability to measure, to memorize information. The thing is, the group, they were trying to test for seeing how you study in order to see who memorizes more, but they accidentally grouped them according to age, which we know would not have been the appropriate setup for the study. But overall, how did each of the concepts affect the results of the study? Now, when they grouped them as a older people group and a younger people group, right then and there they created a difference between groups that was not intended to be measured by the study. So you want to mention that older people have less fluid intelligence, so that would affect the results of the study. Functional fixedness is the concept where you are fixated on the intended function of an object. So let's say a hammer. You can only use a hammer in a certain way. That would be an example of functional fixedness. So when you're trying to solve a problem, you want to overcome functional fixedness. So be careful. Look at the do not score down here. Mo used a baseball bat to drive a nail. This is not an example of functional fixedness because functional fixedness is when you can't use an object in a novel way. So we want to say that Mo used a baseball bat to drive a nail. Therefore, he overcame functional fixedness and was able to solve the problem. That would be acceptable. But remember, functional fixedness is not saying that you can use something in a different way. It's actually the failure to use something in a different way. Okay, so be careful about that. Mnemonic device. So Ellie is a student at a new high school and she's determined to make friends. How can the following help her make new friends? Mnemonic device. How could you use a mnemonic device to help yourself make friends? Okay, so we want to make sure that we know that mnemonic device is maybe using rhyming words to remember club members' names. So remember, like, that we always use mnemonic devices when we meet not always, but when you do those, like, team building activities and you have to say your first name and an adjective that starts with the same letter. That's an example of using mnemonic devices to remember information. Okay, proactive interference. This comes up a lot. Okay, so proactive interference is when the old information blocks the new information. Very important that you memorize this. Proactive interference. Old blocks new. So back to Dimitri and Linda. As long as you say that the old dances or the old routine, they start doing the old routine and it blocks their memory of the new routine for the competition, that would be a perfect example. All right, proactive interference comes up again with Chandler and Alex. So providing an example that explains how each of the following could be related to their life in their new home and neighborhood. So proactive interference, again, this is when we have old blocking new. How can this impact their new life and their new neighborhood? Maybe they have a hard time remembering their new address, new information, because they keep thinking of their old one. Now it says don't score examples of retroactive interference. Okay, came up again over here. Jackie, back to Jackie, the lead role in the school play. She's both nervous and anxious. How can proactive interference hinder her performance? Again, if old information blocks her new routine, she may forget her new lines because she can only remember her old lines. Okay, procedural memory. This is another type of memory. When you're at the pep rally, how can the behavior and perceptions of the participants in the pep rally be explained using the concepts below? Procedural memory. How can we show evidence of procedural memory in a pep rally? Well, during pep rally, when you do procedural memory, it's a step-by-step process that you do because you have knowledge of how to perform a certain task. Like, it just comes naturally to you without even thinking about it. So in a pep rally, you can see that when cheerleaders perform their routine. But procedural memories, just to review terminology, is different than declarative memories. Declarative memories is factual information, knowing what to wear, where to sit, and like the words of a song. Those are kind of like declarative information. Singing the song without thinking about it would be procedural memories. So just be careful about that. Perspective memory. This is when you remember something that is going to happen in the future, in your prospects, perspective memory. Okay, so when we're talking about Annabelle planning to go to college again, how does perspective memory relate to her choice? She's going to remember a future task that she has to do. This is very complicated, but very easy at the same time, if you ask me. When she's going to make a decision about where she's going to college, we want to score things that have to do with, oh, I remembered to mail in my applications by the due date. Like I remembered using my memory to remember a future task, mail in my college applications. That scores, perfect. What doesn't score is she imagines herself at each college to help her decide if she would like it there. Now, although she's thinking about the future, she's not remembering a future task. We're not seeing her remembering a future task. And when she sees her friend signing up for the SAT, she decides to sign up for the SAT. Just by seeing someone and doing an action has nothing to do with memory. When you're talking about perspective memory, you're talking about having to remember to do something in the future and then doing it. Okay, so she's not, in this SAT example, she's not remembering anything. She's just seeing something. All right, retroactive interference is the opposite of proactive interference. This is when new blocks the old. Okay, so when we're talking about this guy John writes an editorial, this is the one about he thinks that people should get an incentive of getting a free pizza coupon for every 10 books a child reads. So retroactive interference, how could this psychological phenomenon influence a reader's view of John's argument? So retroactive new blocks old, they might score the point if they say something like the person newly, oh God, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but when you have recent information that interferes with older memories, so you can say that, oh, I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm really lacking on this one. You guys can read it on your own. I want to finish this up. All right, selective attention is Jackie's been chosen for lead role in school play. She's excited and both nervous. How can this help her? How can selective attention help her? Selective attention, be very careful. This is her filtering out other stimuli. So she does the filtering and the ignoring on her own. She is selectively attending to her current situation. Now, remember, we don't want to use the exact words from the term in our definition, but we want to say she's filtering out or ignoring other stimuli. She's really focusing on a specific task to memorize. So now we don't want to score references to deliberate prioritization or allocation of time. So you don't want to say that she focuses exclusively on her play, ignoring her other classes, and she does a great job in the play, because we're talking about how she's focusing in that moment. It's not really about like, oh, I'm going to focus on getting into college, so I'm going to work really hard in school. Selective attention is a specific, exact moment type of thing. So she may be ignoring her upset stomach as the play starts so she could focus. That's different. That's speaking to the present. Okay, and that's very important. Semantic memory is, we're back to James and his driver's test. How can the following relate to his results on the written test? So semantic memory is your memory of knowledge, concepts, facts, and language rules. Okay, so as long as you say anything about James having good memory of facts, James knowing the concepts, knowledge of course material, that helps him do well on the exam. Okay, serial position effect. So serial position effect is the ability to remember the first or last items in a sequence more easily, or you can also think of it as the difficulty remembering the items in the middle of the sequence. So you just can't say a list. You have to specify that the first items and the last items are most easily recalled. One thing is does not score would be remembering where in the house a friend's phone number is in order to help them call them. That is not serial position effect, but memorizing parts of a list could be. Okay, so here's John with the free pizza coupon for every 10 books a person reads. How could this influence the reader's view of John's argument? If the student must indicate that a reader of John's argument recalls the information but does not remember it came from John, this is a great example of source amnesia. So now you're referencing the reader of the argument, which is what they asked you about. How does this term affect the reader of the argument that John wrote? And but they can't remember the source. They don't remember that it came from John. They might remember reading this information, but they can't remember where it came from or how they learned it. So that's source amnesia. So you want to think about using your synonyms there. Okay, so hopefully that helped you. I really want to make sure that you know to use synonyms in your definitions and always always respond and connect it back to the prompt. Okay, any questions? Let me know. Have a great day.